I know, just make sure the battery's on.
Hello. Good evening, everybody. My dear beloved, we are gathered here today. Yes, lovely piece of equipment. Right, hello, good evening, and welcome to ZZAP Live 2026. Let me start my recording because I forgot. A new venue, a new location, a new format for the event. So I'm sure it's all going to go swimmingly. The venue has been absolutely wonderful so far. Now the internet tells me, or it could have been an email from Mr. Wilkins, I don't know, that there will be over 20 guests over the weekend, a large proportion of them here this evening. Exactly. Over 80 Commodore systems, lots of other systems beside, arcade machines from the show sponsor Arcade Club, of course. The plan for tonight's festivities could be described as loose. I was asked to make it fun and relaxed, and I know you've paid for VIP tickets, you lucky people, so we'll try and make it fun and informative as well, give you some money's worth. We may have an interval, we may run long, we'll see how we feel when we get there. If you want to keep rolling, we'll keep rolling. If somebody wants an interval, we'll have an interval. While we are rolling, the bar at the back is open. There will be merchandise available, such as this wonderful mug. Badges. Let's hear it for the badges. We don't need no stinking badges. We have Fusion Retro Books bags. A special edition magazine. What animal can we come up with for the gold edition of the Ocean Book? A good mix of animals. Okay. So yes, as I said earlier, it will be a little bit relaxed. We're here for fun. I want you all to enjoy it, obviously. If you do need to go to the bar and get yourself a drink while we're rolling, feel free. Obviously try and keep the disruption to a minimum, but don't be embarrassed about getting up, going to the bar. If you do need the smallest room, the same applies. There we go, number one. That didn't take long. I hope he's going for mine. If you do need to use the facilities while we're rolling again, a lot of us are of a certain age, it just comes upon us, it's one of those things. Feel free, just get up and go. We're not going to wait for you, we will keep going. But yes, don't sit there dying of thirst and don't sit there in pain with your legs crossed. As I said, there will be merch available. There are games to play in the rooms to the side. The bar in this room is open until midnight. We're not going to go that long, trust me. I know Mr. Butler has an early bedtime. I think we've already passed it, but he's pushing on through. He's got his pyjamas on underneath his shirt. There will be opportunities for you to shout out a few answers a bit later. A little bit of a pop quiz for our esteemed guest. Speaking of which, the title I was given for this event was An Evening with Gary Bracey. And lo and behold, here is Mr. Gary Bracey. Huge round of applause, please. Here, Gary. Put yourself here. Now then, Gary, let's just tell everyone who I am first. That's me. I'm Mike James. For those who don't know, I'm the host of one of the hosts of the Retro Gaming Roundup podcast. Have been since February 2009. I'm the author of Smoke and Mirrors, the story of the Retro VGS and the Coleco Chameleon. I'm a volunteer at the Northwest Computer Museum in Leigh in Lancashire. Hey! Big shout out for the museum, there you go. And since we last met at Crash, if you were there, or one of the other events you may have seen me at, I'm also now one of the custodians of the Computer Space Fan website, where we catalogue every known existence of the very first coin-operated arcade machine. So that is me. Now there, Gary, I wanted to take you back to a little social club, sports and social club in Kenilworth, November 2013. Do you remember that evening? Microphone up to the mouth, please. Speak quite directly into it. So tell us, what are your memories of that evening, that very first Ocean the History book launch?
I was very pissed. Actually, it's quite poignant because I can see Bob Wakeland there.
Yes.
A few faces who aren't with us. It was amazing. It was, I think, my first introduction to the what's called the retro scene. Sorry, Simon, he doesn't like it being called retro.
No.
But yeah, classic or vintage, like me. I think it really brought it home to me how important or popular the old games were, because we didn't realise when we were doing this that, we're 40 years on now, that people would still be interested in this, and that's what really took me aback, that there was so much affection for those days and those games, and as well as being able to catch up with old friends. And yeah, I've got very, very fond memories. I haven't done many of these. I think that was probably the last one I did, the only one I did. So yeah, it really resonates. I was privileged to be there in such esteemed company.
Indeed, and we're going to meet some of that company as the next few minutes goes on. Don't worry, we're not going to leave Gary up here on his own facing the music. So I was at that event, Gary. I bought the book, you signed my book, and to us, the audience, former customers, if you like, you were a massive part of our childhoods, our game-playing history, if you like, what got us into video games.
Thank you for making me feel so old.
You're welcome. We've got lots more of those opportunities coming up. But to somebody like you, it might have been just a tiny part of a long and hopefully successful career. So how does it feel when people focus on this one specific era of your career and sort of hail you as all these posh words we're going to come out with later?
No, I always say I was privileged to be part of that. It was not, at the time, we certainly didn't think we were doing anything special. We had the most amazing time. It was great. And I've had an interesting career subsequent to that. But I always said, and we've been talking about it with the guys earlier, the Ocean days were the best days of my working life, and I think with some of these guys as well. It was really special. It was the right time. I was young enough to be able to enjoy it because I couldn't do the sort of thing that we did then. Now, I'd be dead. So it was special, and I think I actually drank it in at the time, and that's the important thing, is when you're experiencing something this special, to be able to step back for a minute and appreciate it. And I really did. I didn't think it'd have this sort of longevity, and 40 years later we'd be sitting here talking about it, but at the time it was a special moment, and I've always said it was the rock and roll of the era. And Ocean was a special place. It really, really was. And I know it's very kind of Mike to say nice things about me, but really I was surrounded by the most incredible talent, and I'm not just saying that because
they sat there staring at you.
Yeah. and
some of them have had a drink.
Collect the money later. But no, it really was. It was special, and we had the most amazing time. So yeah, it's nice that it's appreciated as well 40 years later.
Indeed. So there's a copy of the book. As you know, this is a new and updated version. It's expanded. By my count, I think it was 15 new contributors to this book. This is the gold edition, of course. You will be able to buy it later. get it signed if it's not already been signed. I know Mr. Butler's wrist is aching from doing all that signing now. I want to set you all a little challenge.
Signing, yes.
Signing. There's no kids in, by the way, is there? Okay. Now, I've done panels. I've done one with yourself before, Gary, and I've done lots with some of the Ocean people in front of me. Some new faces as well, though. But I do like to try and mix things up a bit. Now, some of these people will have heard Ocean staff talk before, and we always like to hear new stories. There will be some background setting and familiar stories, of course, but I do want to set you all a little challenge. Now, a little later on, I will ask you for a nugget of information, a little story about Ocean, about a game, about your career there, that you've never told one of these panels before. It's not in any of the books. It might be a little risque, perhaps. Not necessarily, but something new and special for this event, this book launch, that you've never told anyone before. You've got plenty of time to think about it. We're here till 3 a.m, so I will prompt you for them later. So just bear that in mind, and we'll try and come up with something a little later on. I did a talk in Cambridge with John Romero, and you know how many of these things John Romero has done. And I asked him for a nugget of information. The one he gave me was he'd recently had a death match for the first time ever with his mum, and she finally understood what he did for a living. So get your thinking caps on, and we will come back for those later. Now, that building behind you there, Gary, and maybe that gentleman in the on the right-hand side there might look familiar. So, speaking of background setting, that is, of course, the Central Street offices of Ocean, and there's lots of information in this book. We don't need to go into the Denton designs, origins, and then later the sale to Amphigram and what have you. That's all in the book, but we'll try and cover, like I say, some things we haven't necessarily covered before. But there is the famous building, of course. And to go back to that period, just give us a brief sort of outline, Gary, of what your career was up to that point and how you ended up walking through those front doors, or maybe even the back or side door.
Tradesman's entrance. Yeah. I don't know. I was in management. I didn't go to university or anything. I wanted to go out and earn some money, so I joined a chain store called Littlewoods, and I was manager of the chain store. That was a disaster. I did something with a family business. They made neckties, not for me. And then I discovered the Acorn Atom. And, I bought an Acorn Atom, got into typing listings because I couldn't program, couldn't do graphics, and got into computer games as they were then. Then I bought myself a ZX Spectrum, and sorry, I mean a Commodore event, Gary. Commodore 64.
You are forgiven.
Oops, couldn't afford the Commodore. What I did was I went to the local video library, remember those, and asked them if I could rent some shelves, and which they agreed to do, and for a proportion of my profit, they let me sell computer games in cassettes. And I used my Spectrum and an old crappy black and white portable TV to demonstrate the games in the video shop, and it did well. And I used to get people coming in, like John Woods and David. Well, John Woods used to come in and say, "Do you want some games from Ocean? Spectrum games are then. Do you want some Spectrum games?" And he'd give me a box of cassettes, and I'd give him a $5 or something, and he put it in his pocket, and he said, "Don't tell anyone." and then a week later, Paul Finnegan would come in and say, "I've got some games. Do you want to?" "Oh yes, don't tell anyone." And so I built some stocks and did pretty well. And within a year, I'd done well enough to open up my own shop in a high street in Liverpool called Blue Chip, and had my own shop then. And that did okay, and I was enjoying that and sold lots of games. But it wasn't really for me. I wasn't a shopkeeper by nature. Mm-hmm. And John Woods, who I knew, called me up one day and said, "Look, we're doing these computer games, but David and I, we know about business and marketing and everything else, but we don't know about computer games. You're selling them. Would you like to run the development department. And I went, yeah, all right. This is just so ridiculous. But I really passionately wanted to get into the business, the core business. And up until then, I'd also met people like Simon. I used to go around, because Liverpool was quite a hotbed, this was in Liverpool, quite a hotbed for video game development, computer game development. And there was Bug Bite, there was software projects, and I remember packing cassette boxes of Jet Set Willy for software projects the day before it was released. And I was friendly with a lot of people, and I said, yeah, I'd love to do that. So Ocean were struggling a little bit with the games they had, because they had an in-house team, a relatively small in-house team, and the games that were being produced there were pretty good, but the problem was they were getting licenses and just farming them out to freelancers. And those freelancers were basically taking the advance payment and saying, thank you very much, drinking it, just pissing it away, and then thinking, oh, it's March the 1st, we need to submit the first milestone so we can get some more money. And so they'd beaver away for a night and produce some crap. And anyway, it was pretty poor what was being produced. And so it seemed sensible to actually bring more of it in-house, because the good stuff was being developed in-house. So the idea was to expand the in-house studio. And fair dues to John and David, they sort of just let me do it. And that's when the recruitment started, and we got lots of talented people in, amazingly talented people, and we grew that in-house development studio into, I think at the time, was probably one of the biggest in the world. It was certainly one of the first major development studios, and it grew to about 100 people at its peak, I think, close to. And that's what started the ball rolling. And because we were able to have better oversight in-house, then the quality improved, and we had, as I say, we were able to get the right people to do it. And that was the sort of the start and the continuation of the early days of Ocean.
Okay, so in the book, Ocean the History, Gold Edition, did I mention the book, the Gold Edition? There it is. Thank you very much. You describe yourself as feeling a little like a butler. Speaking of Butler, who was the hardest person to manage, and why was it Simon Butler? But another question tagged onto the back of that, you being in the middle between the top management and the people who did the real work. What was your relationship like with David and John? And there was a shot here of a lot of the Ocean staff, David and John, of course. Some of them sadly not with us anymore. Ian Richardson, John Gibson, David Ward, of course. So how was your relationship with the upper echelons and the workers?
Yeah, it was good. So, it was great. I, as you say, I was the interface between the upstairs and downstairs, because it literally was upstairs and downstairs. The development was all in the dungeons downstairs, and the management and sales and marketing and everything else was upstairs. And so I had to have a reasonable relationship with both. And yeah, it was good. It was fine, and
It was fine.
It was fine. No, David and John were fine. They were supportive. I mean, they let me basically do what I wanted to do, rightly or wrongly. Made some mistakes and made some.
We might talk about some of those shortly.
Yeah. But no, it was all. Look, this was a new business. There was no template, there was no rule book, there was no manual to say this is how to develop games. So we were really making it up on the hoof as we went along, and what we did, by and large, worked out really, really well. Deadlines were our biggest enemy, but apart from that, we did a reasonably good job, I think.
So while I've been doing events like this, I've interviewed artists, developers, managers, owners alike, and some of them didn't really care for video games. Some of them were just managers. They managed people. Those people could have been making video games. They could have been sealing the top on pot noodles. It didn't matter to them. It was very often a numbers game. Give us an honest answer how the feeling was at the top of the company and down to yourself. you obviously cared about video games. You've been boxing them up and selling them before release. But what about David and John? Were they just businessmen and you took over the game side of it?
Absolutely. I mean, that's why they brought me in, because, and they would be the first to admit it, they didn't play video games, although David probably never admitted that. He didn't play them. But no, they didn't really play them. I don't think Paul Patterson played them. He was the sales director. So it was a commodity. But you know, it was. I think because the movie licenses, particularly, it made their job a lot better, a lot. I won't say easier, but easier to sell because they could identify with Batman or Robocop or whatever. So
I think the bat signal's gone up.
So yeah, it was, yeah. So the upstairs didn't really bother with games so much. It was downstairs that obviously were the core and the heart of the games.
Yeah, and you touched a moment ago, these are great answers, by the way. They're leading me on to my next question, and you've not even seen them. The industry, as you say, was still in its infancy, really, at this time, especially in the UK. You know, in the US, they had Coleco, Mattel, Atari, of course. But our home computer game industry was both thriving and finding its feet at the same time. Mr. Butler, on our podcast, RetroGamingRoundup.com, and his segment Dinosaur Pie, has referred to himself and his cohort several times as the avant-garde. So talk to us about that era of the industry and perhaps maybe being guided yourself by some people while at the same time guiding others into this whole new thing.
Yeah, I think there was a great opposition. Parents would not want their kids to get into computer games. It was seen as a very temporary thing. It wasn't, you know, they're still going today. We thought it was going to be, you know, a 5 or 10 year craze.
Like skateboarding.
Yeah. Hula hoops. But so parents were really, they were ashamed to admit my son does computer games and, you know, but we were all passionate about it. I've forgotten the question. We were all passionate about it.
How was it maybe being guided while guiding others in this brand new industry?
It's tough to say. I mean, as I say, we really made it up as we went along. There was no such thing at the beginning as producers. You know, we had people overseeing the games, and initially it was just me, and then brought in Lorraine and others. And because as the teams grew and the products became more prolific, we needed more management and oversight. And I started spending more time over in the US, and because I got more into licensing as well, because I love the movies. And yeah, it was. I don't think we took a lead from anyone else per se. I think we just did our own thing.
Yeah. Okay. Time for a little breather for yourself. Now we'll get some more people up on stage. Time for a little pop quiz. There were no prizes, by the way. So that is a quote from one of your esteemed colleagues, Gary. Can you guess who it was? And the audience, these are your options. I can read it if you like. He was my immediate superior in the Ocean Dungeons and a really great boss. I will be forever grateful to him for suggesting at an Ocean reunion that I resurrect the Head Over Heels 2 project I'd started years earlier. That might be a clue, but shelved. Big demand for retro games now, he assured me. Let's hope he was right. He is usually right about most things. Audience, who do we think that is?
My mum.
Gary, they're your choices, by the way, but I think people have got it. Who do we think, Gary?
Yeah, well, obviously the Head Over Heels.
The Head Over Heels man, Colin Porch. Please bring yourself to the stage, Mr. Porch. Round of applause, please. So, Colin, you were regarded, as you've no doubt heard before, by your Ocean peers as the responsible adult of the group.
Fossil.
The fossil, yes. Did you genuinely see yourself in that role, or not? Was that just a title given to you?
They picked that nickname for me, but you have to remember I was at least twice as old as practically all the other programmers at Ocean.
And you were what? Were you 40 then?
I was in my 40s, yes. I was born in 1945, and this was 85, 86,
yeah,
something like that. what always amazed me about the crowded ocean, the programmers, every single one of them was self-taught. You couldn't go to university and learn how to program in machine code, which is what we had to do. So we all taught ourselves. And it's not an easy job, believe me. So full marks to everybody that managed to make it onto the ocean team, because they really, really deserve to be there.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. Now, Gary, I expect that Colin was maybe the type of person you could maybe just give a task to and know that he'll just go off and do it. Was that right? Always, sometimes,
always
none of the above.
No, yeah, he was very, very reliable, and he obviously took it very seriously, and also he mentored a lot of the younger programmers as well. We were talking about that earlier on, David Blake. Yeah. So he wasn't just great at making the games, he was actually key in mentoring and helping the youngsters figure out what to do.
So tell us a bit about that then, Colin. How much extra did you get paid for doing all that mentoring?
You're kidding
Paid?
I was talking to Gary earlier today about David Blake, who worked with me on Operation Wolf, and he certainly knew how to program, but he also knew how to ignore the things that I told him not to do. One of the main problems we always had, and I wasn't alone, it didn't matter what computer you were on. I was on the Commodore 64 at the time, but Spectrum and Dragons and Amstrads, they all had the same problem. You're up against time and you're up against memory. Not enough of either. And we got it off to a fine art, or at least some of us did, in how we could get the most amount of time. I'll give you a simple example. In the Commodore programming language, the H6502 or 6510 more accurately, there would be an add instruction, and that would add with a carry. So if you wanted to make sure that the carry bit that would be included automatically was not included, you had to clear the carry first. All right, so, but there'd be lots of occasions when we'd be writing a routine that we would only get to that routine if the carry was clear. So instead of clearing it first, you didn't need to. But David used to put those in anyway. And when you're fighting for every cycle of time that you possibly can, they all add up. 4 cycles, very small in terms of real time, microseconds, but you're fighting against getting things done in time for the next TV frame, TVs we were usually using on those days. And David was a master of ignoring, don't clear the carry if you don't need to, But we had a lot of rows. He was a good programmer, and I think we produced a super game in Operation Wolf. And I was telling my colleagues earlier this afternoon, I actually got an email from somebody just over a month ago. I don't know how he got my email address, but he did. And he said, I've been wanting to ask you this for years. How did you interrupt the Commodore scrolling in Operation Wolf? And that's a question I've had multiple times. If you're familiar with the game, you'll know that the scrolling occurs over 2/3 of the screen and the rest of the screen is static. And that's simply something you cannot do on a Commodore 64. But that was the effect that David and I managed to produce. And I had a lot of questions, and I'm still getting them. So.
And I told Colin all of them.
Okay, time for somebody else then. Let's have a look at this one. Gary was I think that's Anchor, in a daily sea of madness. The linchpin in the ocean machine, without whom their history would have been markedly and dispiritingly different. He had the vision, drive, and that necessary touch of selfless lunacy required to handle a basement filled with melodramatic adolescents. There is no ocean without him, and my career would have gone down a decidedly shorter path had he not had the heart and patience to suffer my absurdities. He is, In my eyes, a legend of the formative years of the industry. Audience, who do we think this is? These are your choices. Shout out. Mr. Butler. Gary, who do we think it is?
Well, it's embarrassing. Yes,
Or did you write that one yourself? No. It is indeed Gary Bracey, yeah.
I couldn't be that articulate. No, and because of the articulate.
Yes. It is, of course, Mr. Butler. Bring yourself up to the stage, Simon Butler. I mentioned before, Simon does a segment on our podcast every month. His bit is called Dinosaur Pie. He's very easygoing. It's a lovely, gentle, easy listen. Listen in the car with the family. Now, Simon, yourself and Gary must have had possibly some awkward moments over your time at Ocean, but knowing you as the mild-mannered gentleman you are, was it ever taken personally, or could you see the decisions that Gary made from his perspective?
I never saw anything from anyone's perspective other than my own at the time. But while Gary and I did bang heads on innumerable occasions, it always was for the right reason. I kind of, I don't know how to put this now. I found him irritating, but only because I wanted things always to move faster than they should have. And Gary was doing things the right way and moving things at the right pace. So, as I say, we would constantly, not always, but constantly, sooner or later, we would have words. I was always being called into his office and told to calm things down and
Not
behave myself and not be a fuckwit. I'm paraphrasing. But, yeah, he was right to do so. Yeah, I can't say any further than that. I came into work, I mean, I'd like to touch on what Gary was saying earlier on. Ocean was just a job. But it was a job where we went in every day and did something that no one else, to my knowledge, outside of our industry, that is, was doing. We would go into work and be paid to make stuff up, to make up the rules as we went along. And hopefully some of those rules would be ingrained in the team so that they wouldn't have to relearn it later on down the line. And for the most part it worked. And for the most part it's down to Gary, because he would call us all in and say, well, what are you doing and why are you doing that? And he brought us all together. We were a bunch of adolescents, a bunch of screaming, spotty. No, you weren't. No, you weren't. I mean,
speak for yourself.
Yeah, but neither was I. I mean, I've gone on record endless times in saying that while I didn't skip into Ocean, with a song in my heart every morning. And I would actually walk through the doors with sometimes, or more often than not, a sense of dread, because I was surrounded by spotty-faced fucking school kids. And they were all dealing with inner demons of one kind or another that they would bring to the workplace, and you were trying to do your job and they're all going, I'm homesick. Fuck off then. Simple as that. And Gary, God love him, he had to deal with David and John and business people and us monkeys in the basement, and for the love of God, I don't know how he did it, I really don't. So yeah, we bumped heads, but I'm glad we did. I'm in a better place now than I would have been if I had never met Gary Bracey. And Gary didn't actually remember the first time we met. I met him in his shop with the long departed Ian Wedderburn from Imagine Software. Ian took me in one day just to buy some discs, and there was Gary. And Ian said, "Oh, this is Simon Butler." And Gary instantly went through his catalogue of games and said, "Didn't you have something to do with Denton's and Shadowfire?" I said, "Yeah, I designed the characters and whatnot, and I did the first layouts of the cover." And Gary, being the supreme businessman, grabbed as many copies as he could off the shelf, got me to sign them, and said, "Hey kids, Simon Butler's here." So that was my first meeting with Gary Bracey, and long may it last.
So Gary, Simon mentioned there he didn't know how you did it, but how did you do it? Did you have any sort of internal personal conflict over Simon? Because he was clearly very good at his job, a job he's still doing to this day. But was employing him, shall we call it, worth that artistic temperament?
Yeah, it was. An artistic temperament, I think, is the good way to describe it, because undoubtedly Simon was.
Well, it's that or Angry Scouser. It's one of the two, isn't it?
But he was an amazing talent, and not just from the art perspective, but also from games design. And so, if someone with lesser ability had the same attitude, they probably wouldn't have lasted that long. But you've got to temper the pros with the cons, and Simon was very, very special in what he did. I'm not just saying that because he's sitting here, but
and he can reach you.
Got Colin between us, fortunately. No, I mean we did have a lot of very talented designers, artists, programmers, and musicians, obviously. But some were outstanding. Simon was one of them. But of course, he was very. Should we say opinionated as well? So obviously we had run-ins, but at the end of the day, we ended up with a great product, whatever product he was involved with, and it worked.
Colin, were you going to say something?
Well, what I was going to say is I don't know how many of you have seen Simon Butler's pure work. He has a remarkable ability to give you an image that you'll recognise instantly, but using so few pixels, it's unbelievable. And you probably don't know that way back in the Ocean days, Simon, during the days of RoboCop, he actually drew a character of me, and it's recognisable as me, and I still have a copy of it at home, and RoboCol, that they call it. But it's me, it's my head, but the rest of the body is RoboCop. But that was down to Simon. So he's not only a great graphic artist with computers, he can draw as well. And he got my likeness, and everybody that's seen that caricature recognises that it's me. And good on you, Simon.
Good on you, Simon. Hooray! Okay, time for somebody else then. There is a quote. Now, some of these quotes are abbreviated. Jesus, some of you can type, can't you? Okay. Gary joined Ocean shortly after me, and if I remember correctly, moved into Paul Owen's room, which was next to the room I shared with Jonathan Smith. Gary had the vibrancy that the company needed and was able to bring the various arcade and movie tie-ins that made the company the most well-known at the time. I think Gary had the ability to sell ice to the Eskimos if he had to. I do think that in later years, you always mix some good and some bad. Whilst I think that in the later years, whilst I was working on the Hit Squad range, things were stretched too far. Who do we think that is, audience? There are your choices. Some of them have gone already. Somebody shout a name out. Nobody's getting it. Who is it, Gary?
I think it's Lee.
Absolutely right, it's Lee. Lee Cowley, everybody.
And you're probably all going, who's he?
Well, I can tell them who you are. You were apparently Ocean's first tester, and during your interview and that process, you got the feeling they were looking for a female tester. What gave you that impression?
Well, in those days, you went to the job centre and they had the cards on the billboard, and you look at the cards, and you turn them around and you see the address. Now, I'd always wanted to be a games tester. When I was at school, the careers teacher said to me, "What do you want to do?" I said, "Well, I want to test games. I don't want to write them. I want to test them. You know what the careers teachers are like? Nah, no mate, that's not going to happen. But anyway, I see the job interview there, see the job plaque there. Gets the interview. The financial director's interviewing me now. Excuse me. And he says, okay, yeah, you're all right, but we're not what we're looking for. We're after a girl. I said, okay, fair enough. I shall be going then, shall I? I said, no. Downstairs, they're after a junior as well. So he went downstairs, had a quick word with Paul Owens and Dave Collier. And then he comes back about 15 minutes later and says, I've had a chat to the lads, they'll have you. Okay, fair enough. And that's how my career started. So it was good. It was good. I mean, from those days as well, Colin Stokes was my manager initially. You know, in those days it was brewing up, it was looking at games that were sent in. So if you sent a game in and I sent it back to you, I'm sorry. There were one or two hits that were sent in. But yeah, that's how it all started, really.
So what was the process you would do then? Who would give you the games? What was the feedback process that you followed, and who did you give that feedback to?
Well, normally the games would either be sent in by post, and they'd come straight to me, or Colin Stokes would get the odd one or two, and he would bring them down. So the one that I would say I discovered to a point was a game called Movie, which was an isometric game. So you remember that, it was done by, I think...
Dusko
Dusko Dimitri, yeah. So I saw that, and I pointed it out, I said, yeah, this could be a runner. And yeah, it did, I think it did quite well, I think.
Yeah.
Now, you've had a long spell with the company, and with the later iterations of it, of course, but obviously, the period being managed by Gary was the highlight, but in all honesty, how did that period compare to the rest of your time?
I mean, I remember when...
Remember, I've got your full quote written down here, so...
I can't remember what I said now. I think when Gary joined, I always remember thinking, I'd heard, we've got this Thai salesman coming to do the job, and it was like, can I not do the job, sort of thing? Obviously not. And then obviously once Gary had been in post for a while, we got Lorraine, and before Lorraine came along, I always remember saying, Gary, can I not do that? But no, Lorraine got the job. But no, to be fair, I think Gary did a grand job when he was here. I think some projects went on a bit too long, and they might have, been to the detriment of the company. But to be fair, I was on the hit squad at that time, doing the same thing, organising some of the games and all of the instructions for the PCCD games. So,
Gary, just tell us a little bit about that process then. Obviously, Lee was receiving games by post. You were out getting movie tie-ins. What was the decision? Who made those decisions about whether the posted-in ones got made, or it was you just did something else?
I think you need to remember that Lee, if memory recalls, was the only tester we had. I mean, and we were not churning out.
Still didn't get a girl.
Yeah, trying to recruit. But I mean, so he was busy, and I mean, when you talk full-time job, he had 3 full-time jobs just testing the games. Yeah. So he would have to, examine, and then obviously when we started getting more testers in, he headed up the testing department as it became. So when I think Lee was getting samples and evaluating games coming through the post, once I got there, maybe I actually don't remember what the process was. But maybe we shared that. I honestly, genuinely don't remember.
You're too busy jet setting. Yeah. Okay, time for somebody else to be in.
So I was about to say, for me, like Gary said, I had various jobs when I started. So I was testing the games next to Jonathan Smith. I was brewing up, I was painting walls, you name it, I was the literal gopher at the time. But the games that were sent in, if I liked it, then it would be passed on to Colin or to Gary for them to look at. And in most cases, like Movie, they would say yeah or nay, and then they get the person in, and it'd go from there, basically.
Yeah.
Okay, there's another quote there behind us. Whilst John and David founded Ocean, Gary was, in truth, the beating heart of the company. He had the vision for developers, for licenses, for the people who bought the games. He knew a good game when he saw one. He knew a good script when he read it. I'm a firm believer that Ocean wouldn't have been as successful as it was without Gary at the helm of game development. When Gary left, the heart left the building. And from that point, sadly, the writing was on the wall. Who do we think that is in the audience? Shout a name out. Anybody?
It was me.
Nobody wants that free pint. Gary, who do we think that is?
I'm embarrassed. I mean, it's lovely to hear. But
And that wasn't all of it, I can tell you.
was it Paul?
It was Paul. Paul Hughes, everybody. What gave it away, Gary?
There's only three of them.
It gets easier. The last one's going to be a piece of piss, isn't it? Okay. Okay, now, Paul, I've heard over the years that your coding talents know no bounds. You started very early, you made a few games, went into the musical side of things, created this little thing like a secure loader, and then combined them all with a playable game with music while the game loaded securely. Yay! You must have been a dream employee.
I don't know about that.
Gary, was he a dream employee?
Paul was underappreciated, I think. And I think, in honesty, by me too. And it was only a little later on that I genuinely realised how much he'd contributed, not just to the games, but to the company itself. His technical prowess was incredible. And I always knew he did a wonderful job. I just don't think I was aware to what extent at the time, genuinely. I apologise.
You're filling up here. Did he ever give you any problems, Gary? Was anyone, on the team, anyone here this evening in particular, did they volunteer for things? Did you ever have to go and say to someone, you are doing this? Or was someone like Paul, willing to just step up and take on the mantle of something?
I don't recall having any issues like that. Genuinely, I don't. We had one or two run-ins with certain people. There was one guy, I forgot his name, Steve someone or other, and he was doing a conversion of Whizball.
Steve Watson.
Steve Watson. Yeah, he was doing a conversion of Whizball on the Spectrum, and it was due to be finished, and there was about 2 weeks left, and he turned around and he said, unless you give me £1,000, I'm not going to finish this game. So, out, gone. That was the only real thing that stands out in my muddied memory. But certainly with the guys here and most of the guys in the teams, we didn't have those sort of issues.
So, obviously Paul wrote the secure loader. How important was that? We know it was important to the company, but how much do you think, before you had something like that, the company lost to piracy, if anything? How important was something like that to be developed?
Yeah, I've gone on record as being this, hating piracy and everything else, which was sort of true at the time. I was a little bit miffed with piracy, which is probably most of the people here were probably responsible. I take a more philosophical view these days, but no, I mean what Paul did intrinsically, and it wasn't just the protection, but the Ocean Loader had some great music and everything else, and he made something that was quite unique that no other company was able to replicate.
What's a pirate's favourite letter, everybody? No, it's the sea they love. Okay. I'm here all night. I am actually. Okay, there's another one there. Let's get somebody else up. The sun's shining on it, but I think I can read it. I first met Gary when I came in for what turned out to be a very informal interview after sending in an A4 printed sheet of ZX Spectrum graphics. This was the start of 3.5 years at Ocean working on the C64 with Gary as my first boss. He somehow managed the chaos downstairs and was very fair with us. He knew how to handle the pressure on us of looming deadlines, and as long as you delivered, made sure you were rewarded. I've not seen him or anyone else since leaving Ocean. That might be a clue. So looking forward to the chance to catch up and reminisce about those days. Who do we think that is, everybody? There's your options. There's only 2 left. Gary, who do we think it is?
This man here, Andrew.
There he is, Andrew Sleigh, everybody.
Who still looks exactly the same as he did 40 years ago. Really pisses me off.
Hasn't changed at all.
Now, Andrew, your quote mentions there, you sent an A4 sheet of Spectrum graphics you'd done in the hope of securing an interview, and then before you know it, you sat in front of Gary. Tell us about that initial interview with Gary.
Well, it was, I've just finished college and thought, well, I've got to get a job somewhere. I was really aiming to be programming, or business stuff, but then I just saw this advert in a magazine and printed out a sheet of graphics that I'd done and sent it off. And then got a letter back, come down for an interview, which, highlight already. Basically, came down into Manchester, met them downstairs. It was, as far as I remember, a short chat, and can you start Monday?
He was cheap. The rest is history.
So that Monday then, you'd sent in a sheet of Spectrum graphics, you wanted to be a developer, and they sat you down in front of a Commodore 64.
Yes.
Tell us about your first day at Ocean Software.
Well, I didn't know what to really do. So what do I do? How do I start it even?
Fat pixels.
Yes, that was it.
So Gary, what was the thinking behind that?
Was it a mistake or...
No, not at all. I mean, what we found sometimes is someone like Simon would work with a number of different developers, programmers, musicians, etc. But sometimes we managed to pair off a programmer with an artist, and they became a team, and that really worked very, very well. And Andy there, we put with ZZAP Townsend, and they put together some really, really impressive stuff. And people like Mike Lamb with Dawn Drake, and there were duos that actually worked very, very well. And that was one particular one where the chemistry was right.
Yeah, because the first work I did was the Mikey loading screen.
Was it? Yeah.
And that's, I sort of found my foot in there in doing the loading screen. So
that's right. I think that's what we used to do with untried artists generally. They would get loading screens to do first rather than the full graphics of the game, and that would give us an idea of their abilities and qualities, and that way they could move forward and get a better idea of what they could do.
Okay, time for somebody else then. For me, Gary Bracey was the face of the British game development industry. Wow. As head of Ocean's development, he was front and centre, American spelling, and at the very top of game development in the 80s and 90s. You need to change your word processor. He is a lovely guy, and I thoroughly enjoyed working with him. Who do we think that is, everybody? There are your choices. Diminishing choices. Somebody shouted Barry. Here we go, Barry Leitch, everybody.
Thank you.
I love that photo.
Yeah.
That was in Peru, of all places.
So Barry, the book describes you as a lifelong Scotsman and an audio god.
I like the sound of that.
I imagine both are a source of pride. But you started on the demo scene and then, should we say, went legit or mainstream. Is that fair to say, and how did you make the transition?
I just got exceedingly lucky over the years. And by the time I joined Ocean, I mean, these guys were making the games that I played when I was growing up. And then I got to work with them. I got to be the total rock star. I just swanned into Ocean '92 when they were the peak of their game. And I got to write some music for some cool games and then left before it all went to shit.
Wise man.
Before it all went to shit, Gary. So, as part of making demos, did you ever try and crack Paul's secure loader, or did you predate that?
Oh, of course, we managed to copy Daley Thompson's Decathlon. You just needed a really good cassette player.
That wasn't mine, that was an overload.
So, how good was your confidence in the secure loader, Paul?
In all honesty, not very. In truth, what you had to do, you had to get a game out for like a week before people could hack it and start copying around. So as long as it could keep people out for a week, I used to change it every time we put it out. That was it. Anybody can break it at the end of the day. You just have to do what you can.
Yeah. So there were multiple secure loaders.
Oh boy, yeah.
Okay, we've got one left then. Gary was my first manager and the most memorable. He didn't view my youth and naivety as a barrier, but entrusted me with high-profile projects from the beginning. The confidence I have in my work today is due in no small part to the backing and guidance Gary gave me in those early years. P.S. I'll never forget that tie. Now I want to ask, is that an actual tie, Gary, or does he mean a personal tie?
I had to wear a suit and tie.
A suit?
Yeah, a suit and tie. I don't know why.
So obviously there is only one left. Round of applause, please, for Mathew Cannon. All the chairs are full. So Mathew, you sent a hopeful letter to Ocean while you were still at school looking for work experience. So tell us about your sort of application process, if it qualified as that.
Yeah, it wasn't really much effort if you think back. But back when we were about 14, 15 years old, we were encouraged to go out into the big wide world and understand how the real world worked and how we might earn a living. So our teachers said, go and write some letters to local companies. And I thought, well, there's a local company that I quite like. I quite like the music they're doing there and things like that. So I thought I'd give it a go. And yeah, I made an application to be a work experience candidate for a couple of weeks in 1988. And Colin Stokes replied and said, yes. And of course, getting that sort of letter when you're still at school was a bit of a shocker. And then when I got in, that was another shocker when I met the crowd. It was a completely, it was a real, it was a slap in the face. It was a completely new environment that I thought, is this professional work? This is the way things work. This is how professional work is done. But honestly, Gary was one of the first people I met, and then the year after that, I'd finished my GCSE. I was one of those spotty teenagers that Simon liked. I was one of Simon's favourites, I'm sure. But I was one of the spotty kids that was, sometimes a little bit bratish, I think, back in the early days. But back in 1989, it was the year after the work experience, and I came back and I'd made some demos. I played them to Gary and to John, I think also to Paulie and one or two others. And Gary and John turned around and said, okay, well, you can do Batman then. I just finished my...
Little thing called Batman the movie.
My last GCSE,
Now, you skipped a little bit there, Mathew, because when you were on work experience, I believe it was, you were sneakily leaving demo tapes lying around the place.
Well, they might have happened. There were no other gifts attached with that. It was just a demo disc,
But it worked because you ended up...
No brown envelopes or anything like that.
Yeah, it worked because you ended up in your own office working on Batman the movie.
Well, yeah, I worked alongside Jonathan. It was really down to Jonathan and Gary. Without their belief in me as a kid, I was completely blown away. I thought, well, shit, I've got to get this thing together, At first it was that imposter syndrome thing. That was one of the young ones. Mm-hmm. But Jonathan was, who, by the way, has to be one of the best and probably the least I think he needs to be better known, Jonathan Dunn.
He's a very humble lad.
He's very humble, but he was such a great mentor and coach. And coupled with Gary's guidance, Gary was straight up, and he was one of the first, well, obviously the first manager I ever met. And you know, I've met countless managers since, but Gary's always stands out because he was genuinely patient and decent person, and you know, we had some good negotiations. Yeah.
I've got to say, just say, with all these young programmers coming, makes it sound like Epstein Island. You know? It wasn't.
Easy, Tiger. Now we've heard that Mark Jones Jr. was the youngest employee. How does Mark's age compare with you when you started, Mathew?
Yeah, I was 16, so I came straight out of school. I've been doing demos. John was giving feedback, Gary was giving feedback. I thought, what I've got to do is, you know, I knew the environment, I knew what to expect. It was somewhat chaotic, but I hadn't seen any project work up to that point. It was just demos, really. It was just me and Jonathan and Gary. Later it was Paul. Paul introduced me to the music drivers and took out some of the old ones, some of the old Martin stuff as well. But yeah, it was great. And if I hadn't been exposed to that the year before in school, you know, so that was a rare opportunity. But hopefully, I think I made the most out of that. You know.
You wrote some damn good music. Let's be honest.
Yeah,
thank you,
yeah.
Really good.
Oh no.
Navy SEALs.
So we've got some shots there of clearly work happening at Ocean. So, if each of you or some of you, whoever wants to shout in, could tell us about, maybe starting with Gary, how intense or otherwise was the interview process, and how many applicants, if any, fell by the wayside, and if anyone wants to talk in particular about their interview.
Well, we did get a lot of interviews. I don't know, someone circulated, I think it was Julian Rignall on social media, circulated the old Ocean recruitment ad of some guy in a Miami Vice type suit and next to a Ferrari and saying, yeah, you too can be a programmer and make millions. Didn't. So we were inundated, and there was a vetting process, which I don't recall very well. But the standard was pretty high, and you know, Mathew came along, good example. He was an undoubted talent. You know, you don't give someone of that age a major project like Batman without you believing in his talent. And we were able to. I think, you know. People have said very kind words about me. Now, I am a little embarrassed about it, but I didn't have. I've said it before. I didn't have any talent for programming. I didn't have any talent for graphics or music. I believe, and I said this to Barry before. Looking back, I think if I had a talent, it was spotting talent, and if that was my strength, I brought in some great people. And that's the thing I'm probably most proud of. And the interview process sort of fed into that. We didn't interview everyone who wrote in. We had to see what they wrote in or sent demo tapes, graphics, etc. And we'd sift through them, and there were an awful lot. And later on, I had help with Lorraine and people like that. But initially, there was just myself and probably called upon Lee to help and help sift out some of the chaff from the wheat. And it was a straightforward. It was quite laid back. People got a chance if I felt they had the ability. Sometimes they didn't get through their probation because you really don't know. But most often than not, we got it right. You didn't have an
Go
interview.
on then, Colin.
Snuck in through the back door.
How did you skip the interview?
I was working for Software Projects at the time on the sequel to Dragon's Lair, and I'd had a few problems with the boss of Software Projects, Tommy Barton, made some commitments that he didn't keep to, and I got a phone call from Colin Stokes. We're looking for a C64 programmer, are you interested? And of course I was. Now I lived in Liverpool and they were based in Manchester. They made me an offer I couldn't refuse. It was far more than I was earning at Software Projects. They were happy to pay my travelling expenses to and from, and when there was an argument with software projects about them not paying the holiday pay, Colin Stokes says, we'll pay for it, don't worry. So, and they did. And happiest days of my life, my days at Ocean, and a lovely crowd to work with. You know, these are just a few of them. Yeah.
I didn't have an interview either.
How did you get through the gate?
For better or worse, as most people know, I worked for a company called Canvas, who produced a series of games of absolute, varying quality. I mean, Highlander was among there, and that's one of the better ones. And it reached a point where I'd had enough. The guys in charge, Roy Gibson and Ian Weatherburn, were a pair of fucking losers. I mean, they really were. Especially Roy Gibson, who said, well, there is an urban myth going round. Gary could actually sort of nail this one way or the other. The urban myth is that Highlander, the contract was signed, and it was only after the ink had dried that those idiots at Ocean realised that any royalties paid to the movie studio would bankrupt Ocean Software. So Ocean told Canvas to make the game as bad as humanly possible. Yeah, that is the rumour that is going round, which I've been recently...
They were successful too, weren't they?
Yeah, which I've very recently been poo-pooing online. I mean, I worked on that game. I saw it from day one. I saw Steve Kane, God rest his soul, flogging himself, drawing the graphics on graph paper. And the game turned out to be an absolute turd. I mean, it just did, for one reason or another. But I'd had enough. During the process, I'd overheard Roy Gibson saying, "Oh, just give it to Ocean. They put out so much shit, they'll never notice." And boy, was he wrong. Because the moment Ocean got Highlander, and the moment it started getting absolutely horrendous reviews, Ocean stopped giving us decent product, right, or projects. And so the knock-on effect with me was I just became disheartened. And I not only quit the company, as far as I was concerned, I'd quit the industry. I just thought, fuck this, I'm off. I've had enough, I'll find something else. And I have no idea how he got my number. But the next day, when I was at home, unemployed, the phone rang, and it was Gary. And he just said, "I believe you've quit." And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "You want to come into Ocean and have a talk?" And I went, "Yeah, all right." So it wasn't an interview per se. I think Gary knew why he'd called me in, and I kind of second-guessed, here we go. Just when I think I'm out, they drag me back in. And so,
Kicking
yeah.
and screaming.
And so I went and met with Gary, and basically, it wasn't, as I say, an interview as such. Gary basically said,
When can you start?
"Yeah, when can you start?" So I was introduced to all the Mancunians who loathed me on the spot. It was like, oh, fucking hell, you're a fucking Scouser, what do we need one of them for? We've got one already, we've got an older model. So yeah, and that was it. I started at Ocean, sort of, and there I was, and I was there for 6 years, I think, before I decided to walk, and then came back a few years later under a very strange cloud, which we may go into some other time. But yeah, Ocean, for better or worse, Ocean produced some absolutely stellar product, none of which had my name on. They produced some very good stuff. Some had my name on, and they produced some absolute turkeys, and they had my name all over them. But it was it was not what schoolboys imagined, as I said earlier on, and I've said at other events like this. People say, what was it like working at Ocean? Thinking it was like fucking Hogwarts. And no, it wasn't. It was just a job. But looking back, it was better than Hogwarts.
Yeah, I think looking back as well, Simon, I think you're right. I think when I was testing, you'd have all the schools come up to you and say, oh, what do? You're telling me a games test. And they go, oh, great, play testing games all day. That's fun. Whoa, great. But not really. I mean, I can't imagine today's era where people have to play the games for months and months and months. But, yeah, well, there you go. But again, I mean, one of my thoughts is when I started at Ocean, I had this view, I had to chat with Simon earlier, but I had a view of programmers and artists as orbit rock and roll. And then I started at Ocean, and you've got Jonathan Smith and Paul Owen and Dave Colley and Bill Barner. They're all there with the jumpers on and the smart jeans and everything else. And then Simon and Ian rock in, you know, and Ian looked like what I imagined a programmer to be. He had the long hair, had Coke in one hand, that's a drink by the way. The Coke in one hand, chocolate bar in the other.
In this version of the story, anyway.
Yeah. You know, and again, the same for Simon. You know, and obviously I've known Simon for a long time now. So they were what I imagined the true programmer and graphic artist to be. You know, I mean, various people have come and gone in Ocean, and there's been so much talent. And it was, for me, certainly the 80s to the mid-90s, it was the golden years, because unlike now, in those days, games, even with a film tying to a point, a lot of the games were original. You know, you didn't know what you were going to play, especially things like Nomad or Cosmic Toad. You know? But, you know, so you had original titles, you had original games, whereas now, I find it hard to play games, because it's very hard to find an original now, unless you go on Steam and look at some of the really indie ones. There are one or two out there, but it's not the same anymore, certainly for me anyway, playing games. And when you've got games now which are so cinematic, again, if you're playing games for so long, you know, I mean, for me, it was bad enough for me, I'd go home and I couldn't look a computer game in the face. Before I started at Ocean, I would type in the computer games in the Spectrum, out of the magazines, you know, Silent Hunter and all of them. And then you'd find it wouldn't run, so you'd have to go through all the machine code again to find that little bit that you put a question mark instead of an and sign or whatever. But after that, when your game's testing, got home, that was it. It was all over. But yeah, so many great games testing. I mean, for me, I was very much an introvert, so I probably regret that in respect that I didn't go out with the programmers or the guys as much as I should have done, which I wish I did. But then somebody called Kane joined, who was like my assistant, and he was the complete opposite. You know, he was a complete extrovert, and he got on with, you know, he went out, did everything. When I say he did everything.
He did everything. Everything. Kane was a species all his own. Yeah. You never knew what he was going to do or say at any given time.
No. But he was a great guy, you know. And then, of course, we had somebody called Rocky. Rocky Ming, yes, he was a black lad, and he was great. And we went to ECTS once, and we had Robocop, and he was in the Robocop suit. And it was great. It worked out quite well, didn't it, Gary?
Yeah. Sort of. He was the only one tall enough that
the thing was
suit
that
would fit.
Do you remember him walking in ECTS and going, Sensimilia Braca Sputnik? You haven't any size, any quantity.
Well, the thing is that I was sharing a bedroom with him. I remember going up to his room one night, and he had some of his mates in there. I went in, smelt the room, walked back out again. You know. But yeah, for me, you know, the golden years were the 80s, and you know, Gary got all the games in. I remember Gary got hold of the Batman script for the first film, so we all managed to have a read. I managed to have a read at that as well, which was great, and something that in a normal life I just wouldn't have been able to do. So, you know, kudos to Gary for getting all the tie-ins and everything else. You know.
Anybody else want to talk about their interview or Should we move on to something else?
I've
go on,
got
sorry.
a pretty good story about my
Go on, then.
interview. So I was working on Nightbreed, the RPG that never made it to market, when Gary had toured Imagitech's offices, and we'd played him the music that I wrote for it, and he was like, I like that tune. It's like, fucking hell, Gary Bracey loves my tune. That's, face of the British game industry here. So it was about 6 or 8 months later or so, and I was in the process. I was engaged to an American girl, and she was about to move over to the UK. It was 3 days before she's due to fly, and I got fired from Imagitech. One of the artists had been looking for, he came into my office and said, I've had it with this place, I'm going to find a new job. And I said, well, my buddy's hiring up the road. And so, of course, the word got out among the artists that I was telling all the artists they could go get work somewhere else. So I got fired. First phone call I made, Gary Bracey. I'm like, Gary, any chance you're looking for a composer? He's like, yeah, come on in a couple of days. So the days are counting down now. You've got 3 days before my fiancée arrives. And I got the interview with Gary. And Gary interviewed me, offered me the job on the spot. It more than doubled the salary I was on at Imagitech. So I love Gary. Gary's the best.
My memory of Barry was meeting him first in Imagitech, and he was mental. He had this long hair, and he was all over the place. Now, he's a madman, but Christ, he can write music. He could compose music, but the whole of Imagitech was a madhouse. But you were the maddest of the lot. But that's what we needed. We wanted some personality, and as soon as I heard that he was available, no hesitation.
Gary's the best, he said. Gary's the best. So a couple of things came up there, Gary, then. Poaching people, shall we say, from other companies and offering to pay their holiday pay and money they've been shorted. How much poaching went on, from live employees elsewhere, and why did Ocean have those extra funds to be able to pay them, or did they just treat people better?
I'd like to think we treated people better. That's for them to answer. I don't really know. I don't think we poached that many people, and to try and be realistic about it, we were quite a big name at the time, so I think people wanted to work for us, and it allowed us to be selective.
Was there a grapevine? Did you hear things?
There was, yeah. But of course, it's always difficult if you've got a company working on contract, doing like Imagitech, we're doing Nightbreed, for instance. It's probably not the best practice to try and poach some of their staff when they're doing work for you. But I don't think that went on an awful lot. Because we tried to maintain relationships, and there were companies like Denton, for instance, in the early days, and DID, who had a lot of really good people working for them, and we'd never consider poaching from them. But other companies were fair game if Gremlin or someone like that.
I don't think it was poaching as such. I think it was just basically just making people aware of a better option. And if they took it, that's fine.
That's their choice.
You weren't sneaking into their house at dead of night, put the bag over their head.
Only once.
Yeah, I can't remember.
That was my interview.
No, I can't remember anyone. It was only later when we moved to Salford Quays and we had all these fucking Johnny-come-latelys from other companies who I just thought were a bunch of talentless hacks. We were churning out shite like silver. That was just round about the time that you sacked me. Less said about that, the better. But I think it was probably for the best. It's Ocean by the time Ocean moved to Salford Quays, it wasn't Ocean anymore. It's simple as that. The day we left Central Street, the day we stopped being amateur and living in the basement and living like monkeys underground, was the day that Ocean died. When they tried to become a 21st century company, that was it. I don't care what anyone says. David and John, they were basically flogging a dead horse and they were fucking fooling themselves.
Okay. Say it like you mean it, Simon. if we can start at that far end, and each one of you will come down the line. Can you each of you tell us a typical, either a day in the life or a life in the day of Ocean Software? What would it look like for you? A typical day at work?
For me, it was all about self-isolating. And I mean that in the best possible way. I mean, it wasn't to get away from the people. I had to work on music and sound, so I couldn't be as embedded with the teams and with the programmers and stuff. But a typical day would be, you know, I'd always check in with Jonathan, I'd check in with Paulie on a couple of things, maybe Gary, and just crack open the tools and get my head down. I was uninterrupted and in a fishbowl, one of the fish bowls, wasn't it? Yeah. So it was a luxury, really. When I did go out, I was a little bit intimidated by these amazing people. It's like you were saying, Barry, these are the people whose games I bought, you know. So I was still sort of treading around thinking, I don't really, I think I'm getting away with it. I think I'm winging it. I think I'm doing all right, you know. But I did look up to the guys. But yeah, it was good to work with. We got a chance to work with the programmers and the artists as well. But yeah, the musicians were a tight bunch, weren't they? Stuck together. Yeah. So typical day was in that fishbowl. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, for me, I got to work at Central Street for a week, so I didn't. Yeah, just a week. And I used to have to get up at like 6 a.m. I'd have to walk up this big bastard hill in Yorkshire to catch a bus into the middle of Dewsbury, and then walk up another bloody hill to get a train all the way from Dewsbury to Manchester, and then walk all the way across bloody Manchester. You do it all again going back. It sucked. I lost about £50 doing it, so...
Tell the kids of today that, and they wouldn't believe you.
Well, yeah, commuted in. I first started off when I first started, got there and got a flat with a mate of mine near Stockport, and just commuted in by bus there. You basically, you get there, sit down, put the C64 on, video player, TV, just open the software. You got basically put pixels, every pixel by a joystick, one by one, and just doing the sprites, flicking them back and forward, and it's, I don't know.
It's a real job.
Heck of it. Well, it was. Well. Yeah. And then usually lunchtimes off into Manchester. Yes.
And sometimes come back in the afternoon.
Mine was usually, I'd think I'd be on the train with Simon, because he was coming from Liverpool, I was coming from Wigan. So we'd go on there and bitch about everything that was going on. And I'd get there, and usually Lorraine would come up with some new compilation. Can we have it on 3 discs? Can we have it on 2 discs? Can we have it on 1 disc? So,
You just straight into it.
Hello. Do it silent. But yeah, I got obsessed with compression after that. But yeah, that usually was my day. Here's 43 new games. There's no masters for it, just break them and then fit them on as few discs as possible, because you make lots more money that way. And yeah, that's what I did. Crack games all day long.
Lee?
I suppose for me, we start with the early day. Well, we'll just go with the early days. I'd come in, first thing I'd be doing would be brewing up for the rest of these guys. And I always had to be careful, because the cleaner has this habit of cleaning the cups out with bleach. So it was never a good thing. Do you remember that, Paul? Yeah. So they always needed a good wash beforehand, so we'd do that. And then once I'd done that, and they'd stop moaning about the tea or the coffee or whatever it was, the day job would actually start properly. So I dealt with returns, like I said, I dealt with things coming in, and dealing with phone calls as well. So, as well as play testing games. So I had a little Spectrum set up in Jonathan Smith's room. That would be where I'd be play testing some of the stuff for the Spectrum while Jonathan was working away. Jonathan was never keen on me being there, because it's a bit distracting for him, you know. No, you can't have a return. No, I'm sorry. It's, you know, speak to the customers and whatnot. But and And then every so often you get a strange request from Colin. Oh, this wall's a bit dirty. Can you give it a bit of touch up with paint? Oh, God, Colin Stokes. So that was the early years. As the years progressed, obviously all that went by and by. And it was just coming in, testing whatever the game was there that needed to be done. I remember games like Lost Patrol that seemed to take forever to play and whatnot.
We spent a long time at Ablex. Plenty of time in a car.
Yeah, Ablex, we'd have the warehouse in those days before they moved out to a different building. They were based at Castle Street as well in the dungeon when we weren't that many programmers. So the van drivers would take us to the duplicated, which is Ablex. And they drove like madmen. This was before the days of speed cameras and all of that. So you'd be coming back, it'd be pitch black. You'd be bombing down the motorway, or it'd be foggy, bombing, it doesn't matter what the weather was, they were bombing down the motorway. You took your life into their hands quite literally when you went with them to Ablex. And of course they were overnighters, weren't they? I remember one night, I was meant to go home the next day after we got snowed in. So Paul Addison said, I'll find you somewhere to stay. So I ended up at this B&B for the day with this family. Oh, and it's like near Christmas, so they're not taking normal bookings. And it was all a bit weird, to be fair. It was just a bit weird. But yeah, that was a typical day for the early years, looking after this lot.
The things you did to get those games out.
I know.
I mean, my typical days were sort of, they all blurred into one, but some of my favourite days.
Sundays.
Yeah, we're with a guy who I can almost feel him sat next to me, and he should be. Alan Short. And he was my coder on a good few projects. And some of my best days, when he wasn't hitting me, because he was vastly bigger than me, was when he'd come up with a new version of his editor, which became known as Shorthead. And it was a thing of beauty. I can't remember whether it started as a sprite editor or started as a tile editor. Which one?
It was a map editor.
A map editor, and then he incorporated a sprite editor into it. And it was the dog's bollocks. It really was. It was fantastic to use. And so some of my best days were just playing around with this thing. I mean, you didn't have much time to play around. As Gary said, everything was dependent on deadlines. But you just try. I mean, there's another guy missing from here, Stephen Jolly Thompson, and he could make the Commodore graphically sing and dance. I mean, he's so beyond my skill set, it just doesn't bear thinking about. But I kept poking Alan and saying, can you do this? And can you do, and can we have high res overlays on the sprites? And he was like, I don't see why not. And he'd go away for a day or so, and they'd come back, and bingo, there it was. And so they're just some of the days that really shine for me down in Ocean. The rest is just dealing with this bunch of fuckwits.
Pointed in that direction.
Colin?
Well, there's a couple of things that I remember vividly. First of all, my first days at Ocean, this is after I'd left software projects and went to Ocean, was feeling of claustrophobia, because those dungeons, the work area was very small, and what have I done? Can I really work in here? I wasn't aware that I was claustrophobic, but it certainly affected me. And I struggled for the first week or so. It's such a good job. I got to explain that. I got used to it. And the second thing that Gary may remember is that when I started on a new project, I'd probably spend 2 or 3 days walking up and down just thinking about it. And this was very much the exception. You give any of the other programmers new project that they were typing away, and after they'd have to rewrite again. I would literally, Gary would say, "What are you doing?" I said, "Thinking, Gary, you know." But at least when I started, I knew what I was doing, and I carried on. I didn't have to go back and rewrite or change things. I knew how I was going to tackle the project, and it worked for me. That was the point. And I like to think I got out some good product while I was there. Some I didn't care for too much myself, but most of it I was very happy with and very proud of. I only knew months afterwards that having been asked by Gary if I'd take on head over heels, converting from the Z80, and I think I told Gary, I don't know, I'll try. He'd already asked, or at least somebody had already asked, several other C64 programmers, and they'd all said, no, can't do it. I had my doubts, it has to be said. The processor was really not fast enough, but we got there after a fashion.
That was the time he spent a month walking up and down the garage.
I'm thinking, Gary, I'm thinking.
Yeah. But it was a superb place to work in. The crowd were good, Simon included, so I loved being, and there was such a sense of camaraderie. Every Christmas, Ocean would throw a party for all the staff.
I think one of them's pictured behind you.
Yeah.
We don't talk about those parties,
Oh yeah, I can remember one of our programmers. He was given a top hat with ice in it, and he promptly put it on, and all the ice came down. But they were great. They they knew how to look after their staff, and it didn't matter whether you were upstairs with the office staff or downstairs in the dungeons with us lot. We were all treated really well.
So Gary, I imagine you probably woke around 10:30, meandered into the office, and saw what was going on.
11:30.
Yeah, 11:30. No, it was. I loved going into the office. It was just great. And what was one of the nice things, at the risk of sounding pretentious, is I didn't have a typical day. I'd start the day not knowing what that day would bring. I mean, obviously doing the rounds and seeing, but there was so much that I was involved with, and I loved every minute of it. It was great fun. So we worked hard and we played very hard as well. And there was just a buzz, there was an atmosphere that I never recaptured again in any of my future careers. It was genuinely a special place, which was made that way by the people, and it was just bottled lightning.
I was chatting with Simon earlier, because it wasn't always rosy at times, Gary, because he recalls the time you walked into the office. One eye was looking this way, the other was spinning round. You'd done about 3 or 4 back-to-back Atlantic flights, so it wasn't all didn't all smell of roses. How hard did it get at times?
It was tough, and that's the point I made earlier. I couldn't do that sort of thing now or 10 years ago. Fortunately, I was relatively young enough to be able to cope with it, and there was a lot of travelling. I'd spent, at the peak, I was spending something like 2 out of every 6 weeks in LA with the movie companies and doing all that, and latterly working with Ocean of America. And it was taxing, but I did love it. I really loved it. I relished it.
You didn't look as though you loved it the day. I remember the doors opened and you came in, sort of dragging your suitcase, and you basically looked like an unmade bed. And I just said, "Oh, all right, Gary, how are you?" What day is it? I mean, you'd been in so many time zones over such a short period of time.
Yeah.
You were completely frazzled.
Yeah, it was Japan then the States, and going to all those different time zones. And that was a good day.
Okay, so we've got a choice for everyone now. People on stage, people in the audience. I did plan one of these in. Do we want an interval? Do we want to keep going? How does everyone feel? We've got a bit more stuff to do yet.
Drinks break.
A break? 15 minutes? Okay, it is now 2 minutes past 9. 9:15-ish. We will get going again. Thank you. Okay, I think we're all back. Anyone who isn't, they're going to miss out, aren't they? They were warned, and we waited longer because we couldn't find Simon.
In the bar.
Next time I'll have a t-shirt with my name on the front.
Okay, second half then. We can all relax a bit now. In the best way, it's all downhill from here. Now, what I asked our guests at the beginning was for... Now, some of them will find this easy because they've not done these before. Some will find it more taxing. But I wanted a nugget of information, a little story, maybe a tale about something at Ocean, something on a game, something they know about Gary. That they've not told a crowd like this before. So we can start at the far end, if you like, and each of you give us a little nugget to go away with.
Well, I mentioned that tie. I'll never forget that tie. It wasn't a tie in a sports game. It was a silk tie. I think it was one that you brought back from the United States, because it wasn't an ordinary tie, if I recall rightly.
I think it was the one I got from Intel.
Was that the one? Yeah. It was a little bit, what should we say? Don't want to get back to Epstein, but a bit adult, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Can we say cock and balls? Can we say that here?
It was a bit more impressive than that. It made Gary look like a bit of a strange sort of alien with a human head and nothing else but a penis. It was a bit strange. But
was the head at the top of it? Is that what
But yeah, so this is, this is sort of baptism of fire for little old me. I was very sheltered, Seeing grown men managers you all look up to walking in with ties like that, I was like, what's going on here? I've walked into. But yeah, apart from that, I just remember Garrett being quite firm, but it was necessary. It was necessary for me towards the end of my time there. I was just, I just wanted to leave, but I didn't know how. I didn't have the skills to communicate that. So, talked to the artist, Simon, all that nonsense. Spotty teenager. But Gary was really patient, but it was also quite hard. I remember one guy, I don't know if I mentioned his name, but he was a graphic artist who was talking about him. Oh, right. Yeah. He was a bit of a genius of the pixels, a bit like our friend Butler. But he was caught playing video games in my little bubble, my fish tank, yeah. So people used to sneak in there and play, because we had if we were doing the music conversion, we had the arcade cabinet there. So, you go into demo mode or whatever, and you'd be rewinding the music and what I mean, trying to capture you couldn't get the notes out of the thing, you had to just listen to it and type it in. But he used to sneak in there and play games, and Gary was not impressed with that.
Busted now.
Yeah. No, but Gary was, it's just those two things. That time was no ordinary time, let's face it. And Gary was took no prisoners. He was keeping us on track. He was true north, wasn't he? Without that, it would have been complete chaos. As Simon talks about, it's true. So thank you for that, Gary. Thanks for being, the same one.
The bar was very low.
The story I've got is about the Nightbreed, the RPG. and I think Gary can probably tell the story better than I can, without naming too many names or dollar figures that were asked for. And because it was a really pivotal moment in the game development industry, because it marked the end of the era of innocence, I think. And we talked about this before. Gary said up until that point it would all been agreements written on backs of napkins and stuff. You'll deliver this game at this point for this much. And then Imagitech were horrible. You want to share it with them, Gary?
No, go ahead.
So
Go for it.
we'd started doing this Nightbreed, the RPG, and the boss of Imagitech was all about RPGs. I never liked the damn things. There's too much typing, reading and stuff. But so the game development had gone on and on and on, and the story had got bigger and bigger and bigger. And it just got to this point where we'd been working on it for the better part of a year, which was unheard of back then. And we still had about another year to go. And so there was no way we had all these artists drawing pictures and writing more music, these big 7.5-minute pieces of music. And I'm like, this isn't going to happen. Somebody's going to have to go and tell Ocean that they need to give us basically a wheelbarrow full of cash to keep doing this game. And so the boss went to Ocean and asked Gary and got told where you can go. And that was the end of Nightbreed. So I've never told that one before.
Yeah. But it was good music.
Right, well, it was Friday afternoon. And Gary came in and said, "Can you work the weekend? We've got an emergency job. I've got to take you to Telford to rescue, to try and do what you can with Taipan."
Yeah. All these titles coming back to haunt me.
So off in the car, called in at home in Buxton, came in, "Mum, Dad, I'm going away for the weekend. Got this job to do." So, yeah, off to Telford, and he dropped me in the office, and I think they'd arranged somewhere for me to stay over the weekend, or the sort of Friday, Saturday night. In the office the next day, couldn't really do much with it, because they weren't going to change any of the frames or any of the maps or anything, so it's just do what I could, tidy bits up, back in on Monday, and then a few days to knock the loading screen on.
That was done by Sentient Software, as I remember.
Right.
Badly.
Yes, to keep the theme of bad things happening.
Sorry, can I have my money back for that game?
I'd be bankrupt with half the games I wrote.
Send your original copy in with the receipt and you can.
It's faded.
So I've got one. I didn't do this, I hasten to add.
That's called distancing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was Dave Colin who told me this one. But anyway, moving on. So there was Gilligan's Gold on the 64. And I think at the time these reset cartridges had come out, hit the reset button and save the memory out. Piracy, off we go. And so Dave didn't like the idea of this. So he used to trap the reset vector, so if you hit the reset button, code ran, and that code ran a lovely little image on screen that had quite a few expletives in it about pirates, Mother Food King, pirates, etc. He remembers this one. All fine and dandy. And I used Pavloader to do it. When Pavloader found a loading error, it did a reset.
Paul, just talk straight into it. Straight into the microphone.
Hello.
Right, there we go.
So yeah, and it didn't duplicate very well at Ablex. So this tapes went in, they got to the end, and then this lovely wall of filth appeared. And Dave tells the story that I think it was John Woods took Dave to a knacker's yard and dropped an electromagnet, and all the copies of Gilligan's Gold that they then had to remaster. So that's a new one from me. There you go. It wasn't me, I hasten to add.
My friend told me.
I suppose for me, it's not real. Well, I'm going to do a couple of short ones. First of all, Simon mentioned Alan Short a while back, and Alan was great. And I remember once, every Christmas, Ocean had the best Christmas do's ever. They were so good, we never let in the same place twice. They were brilliant.
They wouldn't have us.
Basically, yeah. And we were at one club, and all the waitresses were on bunny outfits and everything else, and it was going well, and drinks were flowing. Next minute I know, the waitress comes up to me, slaps me across my face, bouncer comes up to me, ready to chuck me out. Then Alan Shaw comes bounding in. It was like Sam said, a big lad, comes bounding in and said, what are you doing? It wasn't him. It was one of the other directors, not Gary, John, or David. Let's leave it at that one. I think we all know who might have been Simon, eh? No, not you. Not you. But yeah, so that's one from Alan. The other one is on when I was in Hit Squad. Pat Cameron, my manager, she let me have, I say free reign, but we did a loading screen for the Hit Squad. So when you loaded the PCs up, you have a nice pretty little disc moving around and whatnot, that was grand. But I wanted something different, and Pat was saying, well, we can't really do that, but if you want, if you want to do something else, that's fine, we'll add it onto the disc. So one of the artists downstairs was working on a steampunk game called Ilias Kidiachi. He's a bit of a director, big shot these days. So I've got him to do me an alternate loading screen. So if anybody's got a Hit Squad PC game CD at home, look for an FLI file on there. You'll see, it's very Babylon 5-ish. So if you've got a CD out there, have a look for that FLI file. And if you can find a player that'll play it, then have a look at it. It's really, really good.
Mine involves Mr. Bracey. Gary was absent one day on business, and it was a beautiful sunny day, and with my encouragement, the rest of the monkeys decided to follow me into Manchester for a long, very long liquid lunch, which ended up in an off licence, where I suddenly found a policeman's helmet and decided to put it on, only to be tapped on the shoulder by the said policeman and asked nicely to take it off. We then took all our cans back to Gary's office, and I decided to educate the monkeys in the art of shotgunning. Everyone knows what that is? Yeah, it went horribly wrong. And all the beer ended up on Gary's ceiling. And I thought nothing of it until Gary came in. I think it was over the weekend. So it came in on the Monday, and his office stank like a brewery. And all I could hear was, "Simon!" And he hadn't guessed I'd been grassed up. So I just got a dressing down. And that's my tale that I've never told in public before.
I'll see you later.
Colin?
We've heard how Lee was the chief tester at Ocean, but that wasn't the only function that I got him to do. Remember, I was in...
Careful, Colin.
It's a family show.
I was in my 40s at that time, and fast reflexes and the age of 40 plus do not go together. And I was tasked with producing Operation Wolf, and you may or may not know that we actually had the arcade machine, complete with the machine gun, in the offices, but I couldn't play it. So poor Lee, and I'm sure he got fed up to the life of me. I would go into Lee, can you get me up to level 2, please? A couple of days later, can you get me to level 3? And the look would come on his face. But yeah, every time I asked him, he obliged, and he was amazing. I mean, he may not have those reflexes now, but he knew how to play. I found it impossible, but Lee found it easy. And I couldn't have completed the game anyway. How often do the helicopters come on? How many grenades have we got? All sorts of things that you think you remember, then you don't. So, all you can do is look at the machine, but someone's got to play it to get you to that level in the first place. And that was Lee. So he wasn't just a tester, he was a general arcade operator, if you like. And I don't think I've told that story before either, Mike. Yeah.
I've not heard it. Gary?
I've got a more serious story I don't think I've told before, and that was the year was probably around about 87, and this new wonderful computer was getting quite a buzz, which was Apple, the Apple Mac, the very early ones, and it was doing well in the States, and I thought, well, there's an opportunity here for a new format, because we've done everything. We were writing on everything from obviously the 64, the Spectrum, and the MSX, and God knows what. So I thought, well, maybe we can do something with this Apple computer. So I sent a telex to Mr. Jobs in California, saying, "We are Ocean Software. We're quite a large games development company. We've got a lot of successful games, and we'd like to support your computer. So I'd very much like to come over and speak to you about it and tell you what we can do." And he replied back and said, "Yes, fine, come over on 5th of whatever it was, 5th of March, and we'll have a chat." So I prepared what was the equivalent in those days of a PowerPoint, but it wasn't a PowerPoint, it was probably sheets of paper, and got my best suit and probably that tie. Jumped on a plane and made my way to wherever it was, in Northern California, and turned up at Apple's office. And bear in mind, this was in the days before Steve Jobs was Steve Jobs. He was just some guy, who him and Wozniak had created this company, and it was still a relatively small company. So I showed up at the offices, and I'm sitting there in a suit and tie, and the meeting was scheduled for maybe 10 o'clock, 10 a.m. So I turned up nice and early, 9:30, 9:45, and I waited, and he kept me waiting. And as I say, in those days, he wasn't Steve Jobs. He was Steve Jobs. And eventually, "Mr. Jobs will see you now." So I walked in, and he said, "Right, tell me all about it." So I explained what we did and the successes we had, and we had Rambo and all these big IP and coin-op conversions, and how we'd very much like to convert some of them onto the Apple Mac. And he listened to me, and my presentation was maybe 20 minutes long, and he said, "Right," he said, "let me tell you, we will not soil our computers with games. These computers are for productivity, and we're not going to do anything as frivolous as games." Now, I didn't have a problem with that. What I had a problem with was he made me come all the way to San Francisco just to tell me he had no intention of working with us. And it pissed me off an awful lot. And ever since then, I've never touched an Apple device.
So a good few years ago now, on our podcast, we interviewed Al Alcorn of Atari, and he had a great Steve Jobs story. I won't tell it now, but you can find it on our back episodes. It's a great story about Steve Jobs working for Atari at the time, being sent to Germany to do something, and the Germans' reaction to him. So, a funny story I'd heard before, and I made Al Alcorn retell it for our listeners. So, behind us there, we're looking at some Ocean games, some of the library there. Now, Gary, was there perhaps one game that you wished hadn't been published and one game that you wished had?
Just one.
One of each. You can give us 11 if you want.
I think Simon mentioned one before, which was Highlander, which was pretty atrocious. We also had Batman the Adventure, which I've seen better things come out of my bowels. So, yeah, there were a few. What was the other?
Anything that you wished had been, maybe it got cancelled, not finished, or wasn't published but you felt really should have been?
No, there's...
I think Simon has an example of one. Was it Universal Monsters?
Oh, God, yes. That was never published.
No, that just dragged on forever.
There was one game, actually, that Ray Busey in the US said, oh, we've got this opportunity to make this great game. It's going to be a big movie. I've forgotten who the director was. And it was called Radio Flyer. And it was about two kids. The Radio Flyer is a sort of go-kart in the States. It's a trolley type kart. And there was this film about, but the problem was, the film was about child abuse. And we'd gotten the license. Jesus. So I don't think that saw the light of day. Even Simon would have been challenged to have designed that.
I was given the dubious task of designing the main character and animating him. And the thing is, I'd read the script and I was like, and his dad takes him down to the garden shed and... You see, I remember walking out of... I remember Gary sending me to a private viewing of Platoon. So I would design the game after that. And I remember walking out of that thinking, how the fuck am I going to make this entertaining for small children? Especially small children who aren't even going to see the movie for a few years. But once I read Radio Flyer, I was like, what? I don't know who came up with the idea. I just thought, for the love of Christ. I mean, there is, the movie came out, didn't it?
Yeah, it wasn't very good.
No, it wasn't, but.
Microphone.
Also, we got lots of scripts, and I used to read all the scripts. I've still kept loads of them at home, actually. And because they started making money from video games, which they never before, until Robocop, we used to pay them like 20 grand or something for a movie license, and we make the game from it, but they wouldn't get any residual income from it because the royalty was quite low, and etc. Until Robocop, and the movie company Orion Films actually made quite a good profit from it. And then all of a sudden, video games, computer games, became a good profit center for the movie companies. So they started sending scripts through for everything. And I got Rain Man, I got the best, Mississippi Burning. Now, you probably don't remember that. It's about the Ku Klux Klan in the Deep South. I mean, no, so that was quite funny.
I can remember getting called up to David's office, and this was just after Denton's had Frankie Goes to Hollywood. So I go up, and there's David Ward and Colin fucking Stokes, and waste of fucking skin and atoms. And they said, right, on the strength of Frankie Goes to Hollywood, we've got this brilliant idea. U2, the Joshua Tree. And Colin goes, just listen, there's a tree. And I was like... I said, let's not go any further with that. Just let it marinate for a while, Simon. Fuck off. I think it's still marinating.
So there is a lineup of the Ocean staff again. I just wondered if there's any tales from any of you about any disagreements you had over games, a management decision that you disagreed with then and maybe still do now. Not that you bear a grudge or want to start a fight in front of this crowd, eager crowd. But was there anything that happened that you still feel you were right about?
No, but I know that guy top row, the one behind Colin, Steve Lavash. Yeah, we managed, because Ocean Software, the building was the Quakers church, and it had a plaque in the car park saying, "Here are buried some of the faithful." And so we managed to convince Steve that the building was haunted, and he had to work one weekend, and he swore blind he could hear scratching through the walls.
Who's the guy next to Alan Short, the ginger hair?
He was one of the.
Isn't he one of the Bruins? I don't know.
Someone who was just
Woolly.
passing in the street and said, "Oh, well, I'll be next."
Sean Ridings.
He was one of Dave's cycle club, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
There's a list of names.
Oh, right, okay.
And then we had Digby at the front.
No.
Can anyone give me a suggestion as to why the young lady at the front was called Digby? There's a movie called Digby, the biggest dog in the world.
Oh.
I gave her that name.
It was a shocker.
So we're at this point. We are going to take some audience questions. I don't want to run too long. I know a lot of you maybe want to buy the book, get yourself a drink, talk to some of these guys before they do
Go
one.
to bed.
Did I mention Ocean the History, Gold Edition for sale. You can purchase it signed by our esteemed guests once we get finished. So I don't want to run too long, but obviously want to get some of your questions in. But just before we do, there's obviously the movie tie-in question. And we don't need to go on and on about this, but Gary, you can settle a point that I've heard made by someone not a million miles away from you, that perhaps Ocean maybe picked up movie license A, B, and C, as long as they also took movie license D, that may not be quite so appealing. Is there any truth to that, or was each one judged on its own merits?
No, they were separate. I don't think there were conditions. Not that I recall.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you're wrong, Simon.
Oh, I think I said that might have been relating to the quality of the arcade machines. Oh, you can have this one, which is really good, providing you take Legend of Cage as well.
I was corrected on that. Legend of Cargate.
Cargate, yeah. I've heard that recently. Cargate, yeah.
So I know we have got some audience questions. A couple of people asked me if I could ask one on their behalf, but we'll let them do it. So if anyone wants to run around with the microphone, maybe one of my glamorous assistants could do that shortly, just while they're getting that ready. In general, Gary, I know everyone's spoken wonderful words about you tonight, but in general, how was it managing this bunch of upstarts?
It was great. I mean, I'd had no real experience before of doing that, but it was. I think when you're in a creative environment, you feed off that, and everyone was enthusiastic. Everyone was invested in what they were doing, and I think that reflected in the work rate. It wasn't. I don't recall it being too challenging, to be honest with you. Yeah, there were problems, but by and large, it was magnificent. It really was.
Is Simon a pantomime villain?
No,
Is he passing his bike?
he had his moments, but I think we all did.
Okay, audience questions. If you do have a question for the panel, stick your hand up, and my glamorous assistant Stu will bob round. Look after your wallets, he's a Scouser. I do apologise for that.
How did the whole Robocop theme tune and Alistair take place?
It's a bit naughty that. John Dunn did the Robocop theme tune on the Game Boy, and we were approached. One of the guys at Ariston in marketing had played the game and said, "This is great. We'd like to use it in the TV ad," and negotiated the rights, and they bought it. It was great, except we actually didn't have the rights to it because although Jonathan did the conversion, he did a great job on the Game Boy, we didn't own the music. The music was from the movie soundtrack, but they never found out. So yeah, good anecdote.
Hi. One Christmas, my brother was getting a Commodore 64, and I convinced him to go and get Operation Thunderbolt as his first game because I saw this fantastic review in ZZAP 64, and he still hasn't forgiven me about this because it wasn't, let's say, very good. What on earth happened there? Because Operation Wolf was one of the best arcade conversions that ever graced the machine. Thank you. But Thunderbolt, not so much.
Who did Thunderbolt?
Me, Johnny Megan, and Colin. Trevor before it, yeah. It was done in 4 days. Seriously.
And there's your answer.
If you check on my website, the entire story's on there, with all warts and all. It's a long story. But yeah. Sorry.
No refund.
And again, if you've got your receipt and the original copy, I'm sure you'll get a refund.
We only sold 8 of it, so it won't bankrupt.
Do any pictures exist of that tie?
Of the tie.
No.
Have you still got the tie?
No. No, I wore it for my daughter's wedding and then I retired.
Did you also do the dad dance?
I still do, yeah.
I was reading. I was reading that the budget for GTA 6 is about to go through about $2 billion. So, can you remember what Ocean's biggest budget was in the day, and was it worth it?
Wasn't quite the same as GTA 6. Do you know? I was asked a similar sort of question before. I'm sorry, I'm not letting anyone else answer, but we didn't have budgets. Right, we actually didn't have budgets for the game. It was sort of you do it, you make it, and then the budgets came more from marketing, and they said, okay, we'll spend 20 grand or whatever on marketing, and the movie licenses, etc., etc. I do remember Jurassic Park was the first $1 million license in the industry. We paid $1 million for the license of Jurassic Park. But no, we didn't actually have budgets per se for it, which is insane, I know. But we just did them, and it wasn't good business, but no one minded because they were all quite profitable, mostly.
Hi guys, great talk so far, really enjoying it, thank you. Just a question for Simon, I'm a bit worried to ask this, but when Keith Chegwin came and did his short TV programme, did you meet him? Did you get on with him? And did he get naked? I mean, did he get naked? Or you?
He was there specifically to see our junior artist, Mark Jones. So the rest of us were basically told to stay away. Just keep your heads down. And I was never a big Cheggers fan anyway, so I swerved him. And I was like, fucking hell, I don't know what you expected to happen if Cheggers comes. Is he going to see you and discover you and give you your own TV show? No. But I mean, having Cheggers in the office was, it was nothing special. I mean, it's a big deal. There were TV cameras, but we were in Ocean. We were the biggest. We were biggest thing since sliced bread. We were bigger than Cheggers.
Cheggers who?
By the time Jimmy Savile came, that was
Hi there. I really love the Ocean logo. It's beautiful. So do you guys. I'm just curious about the RoboCop series 1, 2, and 3. What was the I don't know, the most profitable? What was the most challenging? What happened afterwards?
Okay, everyone's looking at me again. Well, RoboCop 1 was obviously a big success, and that's not me, is it? RoboCop 1 was a big success, and obviously when you have a success, then a sequel is automatic. And of course they made a RoboCop 2 movie, which wasn't very good either. RoboCop 3 was born because we wanted to do something different, and DID were masters of the 3D games at the time, and we wanted them to do something. We wanted something really groundbreaking, so we gave them that to do with the intention of doing something standalone rather than being something based on the movie, using the character and doing something a little bit more groundbreaking technically. I don't think that worked out quite so well, but it was you know, at the end of the day, one of the things we wanted to do was nurture some more original concepts, because we were known for movie tie-ins and we were known for coin-op conversions, but we also wanted to do original IP as well, and that's one of the reasons we brought DID, or we commissioned DID to do various games, and we had Sensible Software, and they did some magnificent games as well. And RoboCop 3 was an attempt to actually create something a little bit different, but I don't think it quite made the cut. A bit disappointing.
I have a question for Simon, the second Scouser. Of all the games that you worked on, you put your heart and soul into, what was your favourite turkey?
There's such a big choice.
How long have you got?
No, my all-time favourite game, I don't even have to think twice about it, my all-time favourite game working for Ocean was Addams Family on the SNES.
He said all-time favourite turkey.
All-time favourite turkey, I actually kind of enjoyed Highlander at the time, because I liked... But the reason I enjoyed it was I enjoyed watching Steve come up with the sprites. Now, it's only with hindsight that I realised that he'd used the sprites from Cosmic Wartoad, which were of similar dimension, and he drew over and changed them. But I always liked watching Steve work, because A, he was my best friend, and B, he was just working on graph paper. He wasn't an animator. He wasn't drawing on a light box and flipping each frame. He was right. There's frame 1, and I'll draw frame 2 over there. And you just think, how the fuck does he know that one is animating from that one? You know. And 9 times out of 10 it worked. So yeah, part of me enjoyed working on Highlander, even though it did turn out to be an absolute dog. And I don't, to this day, I don't know what the mindset was in the powers that be. It was supposed to be, before Steve drew one sprite, coloured in one square on graph paper, the game was supposed to be a scrolling hack and slash along the lines of Zorro. Yeah, you know, you've seen Zorro on the 8-bits. It was supposed to be like that. Why the sprites went big? I mean, let's be brutally honest. The film is shite. I mean, nothing happens really. The best part of the film is the Kurgan, you know, and the rest of the film is dull as fucking dishwater. So basically, the game matched it perfectly.
I just want to go back to Addams Family. You mentioned it there. Personally, I think that's possibly Ocean's best work. I absolutely love the game. And we were doing a top 10 on our podcast recently about top 10 game endings. And I just thought it was so clever, you know, because a lot of games, they use all the power and all the storage and everything in the actual game, rightly so. Sometimes there's a little intro, sometimes the ending can be a simple single screen, you know, a win R is you kind of thing. But the Addams Family, I just thought it was really clever the way Gomez walks along the gallery, and all the artists and the developers and people who worked on the game are there in the gallery. You know, picture of Simon Butler, drawn by Simon Butler in the portrait gallery. I just thought it was a really clever ending. Do we have any more questions? There's one there.
Hello. I've had too much to drink and I'm not sure how this question's going to come out. The compilations that Ocean put out, factually Magnificent Seven, great, put out, head over heels on that compilation. I believe that roughly this. What was the commercial decision behind packaging up some games that were quite not that old? Does that make sense? Like, I'm just wondering why you would. What were they?
What's the thinking behind doing
What's
compilation
the thinking behind
tapes?
the compilations is the question, I think. Well, the Christmas things, I suppose. I don't know.
What was the thinking behind doing compilation tapes when some of the games might not have been that old?
Hadn't we better ask David Pleasance, because he invented the...
Meow.
I think it got to a point where games had a limited shelf life. Games were, you marketed it, you pushed it out, it sold sold well for maybe maximum 3 months, and then it just dropped off a cliff. So it was another way of giving it a second life, a bit like Budget, really. And so I wasn't involved in the compilations, but commercially, it just gave them another bite at the cherry with good games. And what they generally tend to do was put 1 or 2 really good games with a couple of pretty average ones. Yeah, not so good. Highlander. And that was the thinking behind it. It just gave another, because once the shelf life was gone, it was gone.
Okay, do we have one more audience question? And yeah, down the front.
So this one's about Robocop 3. On the Commodore Amiga specifically. You used a dongle for copy protection, which was famously broken before the game was even ever released. However, I was a good boy and I actually bought it. Now, it could technically run on an Amiga 600, although the frame rate would have been abysmal. However, the dongle wouldn't actually fit into the Amiga 600's joystick port. Did you get any backlash or complaints about people sending it back or complaining about not being able to play the game because they couldn't put the dongle in?
Not that I recall. In fact, I wasn't aware of it until right now.
See, there's a story you've never told before.
We'll do something about that. We'll have to remaster it.
Look into that one.
Can I have a refund, please?
Okay, thank you everyone. I think we're going to leave it there for now. We've run quite long. Just before you clap. Oh, you can clap a little bit. You can clap again in a minute. As I mentioned earlier, we didn't really get into the full history of what came before Ocean, what came after Ocean. We kind of did that on purpose. If you want to read about it, obviously, you can read about it in the book. Did I mention the book? It's Ocean, the History, the Gold Edition. Tonight, you can get them signed. They are £30. They will be £35 tomorrow, so you can grab yourself a bargain. The benefits of a VIP ticket. Of course, you can have a chat to any of these gentlemen that stay around and linger for a little.
Or a small fee.
If you catch them before they go and get some food or drink. Just before we finish, though, I do briefly want to just thank Mr. Wilkins, his family, and extended family. Without him, we wouldn't be here, of course. Obviously yourselves, without you, we wouldn't be here. But we certainly wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Mr. Gary Bracey and the former, some of them, staff of Ocean Software. Huge round of applause, please. Thank you very much. Feel free to mooch. There are games available to play in the side rooms there, hopefully all Ocean games. There is a bar at the back, obviously. And we'll see you again tomorrow.